is an absolutely fantastic day today because as you've seen, we are past our break-in period. We hit the 20-hour mark. So we are going to go ahead and do our break-in service, get our oil changed, our differential changed, our transmission fluid changed, and then we can finally rip in the Rmax 1000. I've been excited to be able to put the pedal to the floor in this thing, hook up the draggy, get some times. We're going to quickly go over the oil change, the differential fluid change, and the transmission change. And then we will be able to open this bad boy up and play like we mean it. Now, if you've already seen my X4 oil change video, the Rmax here is very, very similar. There's only a couple little differences we'll go over when we get to it. But for oil, I went ahead and picked up actual Yamaha lube. I got their full synthetic 10W40. The Rmax takes just over 4 quarts when you're doing an oil filter. I think it's like 4.1, so I went ahead and picked me up 5 quarts of that. And for oil filter, since Yamaha oil filters were back ordered, I went with a Tusk, which I think pretty much is just a rebranded OEM Yamaha. As far as I can tell from the Tusk filters I've gotten in the past, the only difference is it doesn't say Yamaha on it. But everything else is identical. Even the writing and stuff on the side is pretty much identical. I've already got the Rmax up to operating temperature. Let her set about 10 minutes to cool down. So let's dive right in. Of course, first thing we got to do is take off these rear cup holders, which we just give these pins a little twist to loosen them, and then they will pop right out. There's 5 total, 2 on the passenger side, 1 in the center, and then 2 on the driver's side. Once these guys are all out, then this guy is just gonna pop right out of place. Oh, maybe. One thing while I have this off here, I want to show you guys, they did kind of improve. I know on the X4s, this heat shield was notorious for falling off, but they've added these little metal brackets in here now to help hold it, so if the glue lets loose, these will not fall. So that's pretty nice. And there is the heart of the beast, the 999 cc's of Fury. So looking in here, very, very similar to the X4. The CVT exhaust is a little different. You see now they have a port here to actually blow across the engine to cool. And other than that, it is the exact same. I'm going to go ahead and get the air hose this off quickly to get some of this dirt. And then we are going to remove the fill cap from the head and the fill cap and oil check cap here on our oil jug. In case you don't know, the Rmax 1000 is a dry sump oil system, which means the oil is not all held in the motor. It's held here in this oil jug, gets pumped into the motor through all the internals to lubricate and do all the oily goodness it's meant to do, and it gets sent back in the oil tank to pretty much redo it again. And I prefer a dry sump oil system. It is, I think, a superior system than a wet sump where all the oil is in the motor. Because anytime with a wet sump, if you're accelerating hard, you're on steep inclines, the oil has a tendency to run to one side of the motor or the other, and you can actually starve an engine of motor that way. But with the dry sump system and that oil being held in a separate tank and it continually circulating throughout the engine, you pretty much eliminate that. So when you're giving it the beans and putting the pedal to the floor, you don't have to worry about all your oil being shoved back from the awesome G-forces, starving your motor of oil. And that's why the oil system on the Rmax seems so complicated and you have to do all these extra steps. It's got so many different drain plugs, as you'll see here as we get to it, but it is a superior oiling system and it is much, much better for the longevity of your motor. So I'm glad it has it. All right, the first thing I'm going to drain is the oil jug. And if you're on the driver's side here, you got your rear wheel. And if you look right in past that, there is your oil jug. And you can see right there is your drain. It's on a little stubby that sticks down from the bottom of the oil jug. It's a 10mm bolt. And you can see that I have a little trough here to help direct the oil away from the frame. Although I will mention that it looks like they've made this stick out a little farther than it was on the X4. So most of it would probably shoot out past, but you'd still get some on there, so I'm still going to use the drain. Actually, I changed my mind, guys. We're going to see if this is out enough. I'm sure it's probably still going to drip down here on the frame rail. But like I said, it looks like it sticks out farther than the X4s did. So let's just find out if it does drain out past a little better. The book still shows you using some little trough, so we'll see. I'll get my buggy a little muddy for you. Oh, look at that! It does, for the most part, miss everything. I'm sure once it gets down lower, it's probably going to drip on the frame a little bit. But for the most part, it's missing a lot more than it did the X4. Let's just take a quick look at this here. Oh, she's clean. She's very clean, guys. I know with the GoPro it doesn't pick up or focus real close, but I am seeing no metallic residue whatsoever. That's a very good sign. And that's what you want to see. Although a light metallic haze to your break-in oil can be expected because, again, it's break-in. So don't panic if you see that little bit of a metallic sheen in your break-in oil. That is to be expected. Whoa! And don't lose your little crush washer off your bolt either. I know Yamaha would recommend replacing this every oil change. I never have. I probably never will. But that is entirely up to your guys' decision and if you feel like you need to. If you like to play it safe, go ahead and replace it. Like I said, I have never on any buggy I've ever owned replaced the crush washers unless they were damaged. And they very, very often are not damaged. Most times they're not damaged. So, there you guys can see now that she has slowed down. There is more dripping on it. But still, that's not too bad. Most of it's running right off. You know my hillbilly mentality. That's just going to help keep the mud and rust from forming on it, right? You betcha. And that little bolt, for you guys that like to torque your bolts to spec, torque that down to 6.6 foot-pounds. All right, next we got 2 drain bolts in the motor itself to drain what motor is held in the oil. They are going to be 12 millimeter. So we're going to come here on the passenger side rear tire. Here is the crack between our front and rear door. You want to follow that straight down and then straight ahead. You will see this oblong hole right here. That is your 2 engine drain bolts. You got one right there and one right there. So I'm going to pull both of them, let them drain for several minutes, and reinstalled, they get tightened to 15 foot-pounds. We're not quite done draining oil yet. The Rmax has one more drain location you're supposed to do, and that is the oil cooler drains. However, I can't see if we're going to get a whole lot of oil out of that after we've drained everything else, because the oil cooler lines are going to kind of probably backfeed into the engine lines, but we'll see how much oil we get out of them. It might be one of those things where if we don't get much, then we won't worry about changing it anymore. But for this initial break-in service, we are going to drain them. And they are located, here's your driver's side, here's the front of your driver's side door. You come right straight under the machine. You are going to see this large square and then this oblong hole right here. And there are 2 8 millimeter bolts right there. You can see them on the oil feed lines. We're going to pull those and we'll just see how much oil we get out of it. Yeah, kind of what I expected. Not a whole lot. Yeah, it's enough though, I guess, for this break-in. We'll make sure to do that to, like I said, any metallic residue from break-in that might be in that oil, we'll flush out of there. But we may just go down to like every other oil change draining this from here on out. I'll let that drain, reinstall our little 8 millimeter bolts, and those guys get torqued down to 7.4 foot-pounds. All right, last but not least, we have the oil filter to replace. We are here on the passenger side, right in front of your rear tire and the fender well here. Remove this little plastic panel for easy access. It's got 2 10 millimeter bolts and one of these push rivets here. This is the kind you got to spin with a screwdriver. Find a screwdriver. Sometimes these can be a pain to take out. Sometimes they come right out. This one's gonna come right out. Look at that. It's a nice thing about a brand new machine. And I'll pop them two 10 mils out. And then there's two more 10 millimeters in here where these grooves are. They're kind of up in there. You probably can't see, it's too dark, but there's two in there as well. Now, if there's 4 bolts out, that one pin out, this should pull right out. And back full of mud. And there is our oil filter. So I should be able just to undo this by hand if it's not overly tight. It's still kind of a pain, even with that off, to get in there to it by hand, but I got a filter wrench we'll get on there. Oh, way too tight. That is way too tight. Oh, why do OEMs always over tighten their filters? Every time. Should be no more than hand tight. Well, that was quite the chore because that thing was, it must have been torqued on there by King Kong or something, but I finally got it off. I'm just going to take a little bit of this dripping oil, put around the O-ring of the new one. That keeps the O-ring from getting in a bind as you spin it on and kinking, which will cause it to not seal. So you're going to apply a thin layer of oil around it. We'll screw this puppy back on and put our panel back in. And that's time to fill with oil. And if you watch my Rmax 2 walk around video I did a while back when these first came out, I showed you how it had that hole that you could probably get up into without having to take that one panel off. Well, as you can see, I can't get my whole hand up in there enough to actually turn, but you might not be able to get enough leverage to get in there to torque it like you need to. And if you got big hands, you probably can't get in there, but I can get in there. All right, now we got to add our oil back in, and unlike the X4, Yamaha actually tells you with the Rmax to add a little oil in here through the filler cap in the head. So we're gonna add about 1.5 quarts of oil here in the head, and then the rest we will add into the oil tank down there. Again, I'm using the Yamaha full synthetic 10W40. And I'm going to transfer this right over into the oil jug. Boop. And we'll put this other 1/2 quart in. And the book tells you to put about 2.1 quarts in the jug. So we'll add about another 1.5 quarts. Start it, let it run, and then check our levels and top her off. Let her run for a few minutes to circulate the oil, refill the oil filter, and refill our oil cooler. Now when checking your oil level, you want to pull this dipstick, wipe it off, and then stick it back in without screwing it. Do not screw it in tight. You just want to set it down in till it touches. So the book calls for 4.3 quarts total when changing the oil filter. I'm about 4.5 quarts here. And we are right to the top of our range marks. So I'd say that's good. And we'll throw cup holders back on. And reinsert all our clips. Then of course you want to take her out, drive her for a couple miles, and recheck just to be on the safe side, make sure you didn't overfill or need to add more. But that is the oil change on an Rmax 1000 or an Rmax 1004. In the next video, we're going to go ahead and tackle the transmission fluid. It is super easy. That should be a real short video. And then we'll finish up this maintenance series by tackling the front and rear differential in part 3. So I hope you found this video helpful in changing the oil of your Rmax, especially at the prices dealers charge nowadays. This is something you can definitely tackle at home on yourself for a fraction of the cost. And if you did find this video helpful, I would appreciate you considering supporting Appalachian Mountain Riders on Patreon. You can support on Patreon and get full access to all the bonus content I upload there for as little as $1 a month. That's it. That's all it takes. $1. And you can find that much spare change laying in your couch or in your seat cushions, probably even in your side-by-side. Get a little as $1 a month to get you full access to all the bonus content I have on there and all I will be putting up in the future. And of course, your views and thumbs ups are highly appreciated as well. So we will see you in part 2 of servicing the Rmax 1000. And until then, keep on riding.